Ava Gardner is standing in the center of the royal suite at Hotel Nacional Havana. Her hand grips a silver .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. The barrel isn't pointed at the floor. It's pointed at Frank Sinatra. Frank's lip is bleeding. His white dress shirt is torn at the collar. Behind him, the mirror lies shattered in 1,000 pieces. Glass shards glitter across the carpet like diamonds. An empty champagne bottle rests near the door, where Ava threw it seconds ago. In the hallway, 4 security guards are pounding on the mahogany door. Their voices are muffled, but urgent. Downstairs, 8 floors below, 2,000 people are waiting in the casino showroom. The concert should have started 47 minutes ago. The orchestra has played the warm-up 3 times. People are getting restless. Frank's eyes are locked on Ava's, not on the gun, on her eyes. Ava's voice cuts through the silence, steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. Tell me who that woman was. 6 days earlier, none of this seemed possible. February 14th, 1952. Havana Airport, midday heat. When Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner stepped off the Pan Am flight, 40 photographers were already waiting on the tarmac. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters shouted questions in Spanish and English. Cuba wasn't just a tropical paradise in 1952. It was Hollywood's secret garden, the perfect hideaway for casino kings, mob bosses, and stars trying to bury their scandals in Caribbean sunshine. Frank was 37 years old but looked 50. The numbers told the story. In the last 18 months, his record sales had dropped 73%. MGM Studios had announced publicly they wouldn't renew his contract. Columbia Records had let him know, quietly but firmly, that he wasn't selling anymore. His divorce from Nancy had been front-page news for months. The Catholic Church had excommunicated him. Variety, the industry Bible, had used 2 words that haunted him. Washed up. Hotel Nacional had offered Frank $50,000 for 10 nights of concerts. A year ago, he would have laughed at such a number. Too small. Now he had to accept, not just because he needed the money, though he did. He needed something more essential. He needed the stage. Because without the stage, without the spotlight and the microphone and the audience hanging on every note, who was Frank Sinatra anyway? Ava was living in the opposite universe. At 29 years old, she'd been on the cover of Life magazine 3 months earlier with a headline that said it all: the world's most beautiful woman. MGM was flooding her with film offers. Paramount wanted her. Columbia wanted her. Everyone wanted Ava. But Ava had come to Havana for one reason, and it wasn't the Caribbean sun. She'd come for Frank, reluctantly, because their marriage was falling apart, and this trip was supposed to save it. In the hotel lobby, the receptionist greeted them with professional warmth. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Sinatra." Ava corrected him immediately, her voice cool and sharp. "Miss Gardner." Frank's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near his temple. He leaned toward the desk. "My wife's name is Mrs. Sinatra." Ava said nothing. She turned on her heel, walked across the marble floor to the balcony, and lit a cigarette. She stood there looking out at Havana Bay, the smoke curling upward in the humid air, her shoulders tense. This was their relationship in miniature. Frank trying to hold on, Ava trying to escape. They'd met 2 years earlier, in 1950, at a Hollywood party thrown by someone neither of them could remember later. Frank was still married to Nancy then, though the marriage was already a corpse, just waiting for burial. Ava had just divorced Artie Shaw, the bandleader and intellectual who'd tried to mold her into someone she wasn't. That night, Frank had watched Ava argue with the studio executive. The man was offering her a role in his next picture, trying to charm her. Ava wasn't even pretending to listen. She told him she hadn't read his screenplay. Why would she? They were all the same anyway. Beautiful woman, stupid role, predictable ending. The executive's face had turned red. Nobody talked to studio bosses like that in Hollywood. You smiled, you said thank you took the role, or you turned it down politely. But Ava did what she wanted. She turned and walked away. Frank understood something in that moment. This woman was different. He chased Ava for weeks. She kept running. She told him he was a married man. He should go home to his wife and children. But Frank wouldn't give up. He sent flowers. He called, he showed up at restaurants where he knew she'd be. One night at 3 in the morning, Frank appeared at Ava's door, drunk. When she opened it, his eyes were bloodshot red. Had he been crying, or was it just the whiskey? Hard to tell. Frank told her something that night that Ava never forgot. He said she didn't have to be with him. He had no money. Not real money, not anymore. His career was ending. His reputation was destroyed. Catholic mothers told their daughters not to date men like Frank Sinatra. But he couldn't breathe without her. He'd tried. He couldn't. Ava truly saw Frank for the first time that night. Not the confident singer, not the Bobby Soxer idol. She saw a fragile man off stage, someone pure and childlike when he talked about music, someone who wanted to protect her but knew he could never own her. 6 months later, they were married. The same day the divorce from Nancy was finalized, they stood before a judge in Philadelphia. But the marriage wasn't what either of them expected. Frank tried to control. Ava needed freedom. Frank was jealous of every man who looked at her. Ava rebelled against every boundary. In 11 months, they'd separated and reconciled 3 times. And now in Havana, this was supposed to be their last chance. Night 1, February 15th. The first night went smoothly. Frank took the stage at 10 o'clock sharp. His voice wasn't what it used to be. He'd had bleeding in his vocal cords months earlier, and the doctors had told him to rest. But he hadn't rested. He couldn't afford to rest. He sang night and day, and I've got you under my skin, and the audience loved him. They didn't know he was washed up, or maybe they didn't care. Ava sat at one of the casino tables, drinking martinis and playing baccarat. She won $300. She tipped the dealer $50. When Frank came back to the room at midnight, Ava was already asleep. He stood in the doorway watching her for a long time. Night 2, February 16th. The second night was almost identical. Frank on stage, voice holding. Ava at the tables, this time losing money but not caring. They were like 2 planets orbiting the same sun but never touching. Night 3, February 17th. The third night, everything shifted. Frank was about to go on stage when he glanced toward the bar. Ava was there. A Cuban man sat beside her, leaning close, saying something in rapid Spanish. Ava laughed, really laughed, the way she used to laugh with Frank when they first met. Frank almost dropped the microphone. He walked on stage. The orchestra started playing The Lady is a Tramp. Normally, Frank would have smiled at the irony. Tonight, he didn't smile. He got through the first verse, the second verse. Then, in the middle of the third verse, he stopped. The orchestra kept playing, but Frank had gone silent. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The silence stretched out like a physical thing. 2,000 people held their breath. Frank's eyes were locked on the bar, on Ava, on the man beside her. Finally, Frank pulled himself together. He put the microphone back to his lips. "Sorry, folks," he said, his voice rough. "Throat's a little dry tonight." He coughed. The audience laughed nervously, relieved. But everyone who was there that night knew it. Frank Sinatra had never stopped mid-performance before. Not once in 20 years. When Frank returned to the room at 2:30 in the morning, Ava still hadn't come back. He stood on the balcony, smoking, even though the doctors had forbidden it. He didn't care anymore. Ava finally walked through the door at 3:15. Frank was on his feet immediately. "Where were you?" Ava set down her purse. "At the casino bar." "With who?" Ava rolled her eyes. "Jesus, Frank, this again?" "The man speaking Spanish. Who was he?" Ava laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "The hotel manager's brother. He imports cigars. He wanted to talk business." "Business," Frank repeated, the word heavy with disbelief. "Yes, Frank, business. Tobacco imports. Because I'm still working. I'm not in a career graveyard like some people." The words hung in the air like a slap. Frank's face darkened. He cursed loud and ugly. Ava held up one hand. "Not tonight. I'm tired." She walked into the bathroom and locked the door. Frank stood there for a moment, then sat heavily on the bed and buried his head in his hands. They didn't speak at breakfast. Frank went to his orchestra rehearsal. Ava spent the afternoon at the beach with a script she wasn't reading. They ate dinner separately. Afternoon of February 19th, Frank was heading downstairs to his afternoon rehearsal when the elevator stopped on the fourth floor. The doors opened. Virginia Hill stepped in. Virginia was impossible to miss. Blonde, beautiful, and dangerous in the way only certain Hollywood women could be. She'd been Bugsy Siegel's girlfriend before Bugsy took 2 bullets to the head in Beverly Hills. Now she worked as a producer's assistant, which meant she opened doors for people who needed them open. Frank, Virginia's face lit up. What a wonderful coincidence. Frank smiled because he had to. Virginia, didn't know you were in Havana. Oh, I'm always everywhere, darling. She touched his arm. Listen, I need to talk to you. I'm meeting with Harry Cohn tomorrow. About From Here to Eternity. They want me to put in a word for someone. Frank's heart started pounding. The Maggio role. Private Angelo Maggio, the scrappy Italian-American soldier. It was a small part, but everyone in Hollywood knew it was Oscar material. Columbia Pictures didn't want Frank for it. They thought he was too old, too washed up, too much scandal. I could help you, Virginia said, her voice dropping lower. But you know how these things work, Frank. One favor requires another. She touched his cheek, her hand lingering. We should talk. Properly. That's when Ava appeared. She was 10 meters away, walking toward the elevator with Jean-Pierre, a French photographer who'd been following her around all week for a Paris Match interview. She saw everything. Virginia's hand on Frank's cheek. Frank's smile. How close they were standing. Ava stopped. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no hurt, nothing. But Jean-Pierre noticed. He'd been photographing faces for 20 years. He knew. Madame Gardner, Jean-Pierre said quietly, perhaps we should go. Ava didn't respond. She turned and walked toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. By the time Frank noticed her, Ava was already gone. Frank felt his chest tighten. He told George Jacobs, his security chief, to find Ava. Now. George came back 30 minutes later. She's in her room, doors locked. She's not talking to anyone. Frank ran. He took the stairs 2 at a time. He pounded on the door. Ava, open the door. No response. He knocked again. Ava, please. Her voice came from inside, cold and flat. Get lost, Frank. Frank had the hotel manager open the door with a master key. When he stepped inside, Ava was in the bathroom, sitting in the empty tub, still fully dressed, a bottle of champagne in her hand. She didn't look at him. What you saw downstairs, Frank started. It wasn't. I don't care, Ava said. Virginia was just. Ava turned then. Her eyes were red but dry. Ava didn't cry. Ever. Just what, Frank? Flirting? Touching your face? Smiling at you like she wants to fuck you? No, she's meeting with Harry Cohn about the Maggio role. For me. Ava laughed, sharp and humorless. For you, of course. Everything is always for you, isn't it? Ava, leave, Frank. You have a show in an hour. Frank hesitated. Then he left. But he turned at the door. I love you. Ava took another drink of champagne. She didn't respond. Calm, February 21. Evening. Indifferent. All day, Ava stayed in the room. The maid knocked. Dismissive. Ava sent her away. Room service knocked. Frustrated. Ava said she didn't want food. Frank called from downstairs. Stubborn. Ava didn't answer the phone. Tense. At 6 o'clock, Frank came back to the room. He used his key this time. Confident, Ava was sitting at the makeup table, wearing a black evening gown. Her hair was perfect. Her lipstick was red. She looked like she was about to attend a premiere. Admiring. You look beautiful, Frank said. Cold, I know, Ava replied without looking at him. Hopeful. Will you come, Genders? To the show? Sarcastic. Ava met his eyes in the mirror. Why would I? So I can watch you look for that blonde in the audience. Defensive. Ava Virginia was just angry, shouting. Enough. Ava shouted, furious. She stood up. You even know her name, Frank? You even remember her goddamn name. Violent. She grabbed the champagne bottle from the table, threw it at the wall. Glass exploded. Champagne ran down the wallpaper like blood. Pleading, Ava, calm down. Escalating. The second bottle. This one whistled past Frank's head and hit the mirror. The mirror shattered into a spider web of cracks. Alarmed voices erupted in the hallway. Footsteps running. Security guards. "Is everything okay in there?" Shouting, Frank shouted at the door. "Yes. Leave us alone." Ominous. But Ava wasn't finished. Slow and deliberate. She walked slowly to her purse on the dresser, reached inside, pulled out the gun. Dramatic. The Smith & Wesson .38 looked enormous in her hand. Scared. Frank froze. "Ava, what are you doing?" Threatening. Ava raised the gun, not pointing it directly at Frank yet, just holding it, trembling. Her hand was shaking. Crying, tears were streaming down her face now. But her voice was eerily calm, whispering, "Tell me who that woman was." Panicked, Ava put the gun down, shouting, "Tell me," deadly serious. The gun moved, the barrel now pointing at Frank's chest. Distant, downstairs in the casino showroom. The orchestra was warming up for the third time. Frustrated. People were starting to get angry. They'd paid good money to see Frank Sinatra. Where the hell was he? Regent Manuel Rivera, the hotel manager, was running up the stairs. Walter Winchell, the most famous gossip columnist in America, was in the lobby, sensing a story. Cuban police were gathering outside the hotel entrance, intense. But in the royal suite on the 8th floor, time had stopped. Gentle Frank looked at Ava. Really looked at her. Not at the gun, at her eyes, at the pain in them. Surrendering, slowly, very slowly, he took off his tuxedo jacket, let it fall to the floor, resigned. "You're right," he said quietly. Confused, Ava's hand trembled. The gun lowered slightly. "What?" Regretful. "You're right, about everything." Cautious, Frank took one step forward. Not toward the gun, just forward, ashamed. "I'm a terrible husband. I try to control you because I'm terrified of losing you. I talked to Virginia about the film. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed." Broken. "Ashamed?" Ava's voice cracked, vulnerable. "Yes." Frank took another step. "Ashamed that Frank Sinatra, have to beg producers for roles, for a tiny role. A supporting character. Devastated. Because I have nothing left, Ava. Nothing." Heavy silence. Silence filled the room. Emotional. Frank's voice broke. "The career can go, the money can go. The fame, all of it can go." Desperate. "But if you leave," he stopped, started again. "If you leave, I'm gone too." Whispering. "There's no Frank Sinatra without you, just an empty suit and a broken voice." Realization. Ava stared at him. Her finger wasn't on the trigger. Actually, it never had been. She looked down at the gun, as if seeing it for the first time. How had it gotten into her hand? Release. The gun fell to the carpet. With a heavy thud. Sobbing, Ava collapsed against the wall, and for the first time since Frank had known her, she really cried. Not silent tears, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Understanding. Frank didn't move toward her. He knew better. He sat down on the floor, his back against the bed. Waited. Urgent. Another knock at the door. Diplomatic. Manuel Rivera's voice, careful and diplomatic. "Mr. Sinatra. The police are asking questions." The concert. Authoritative. Frank stood, opened the door just wide enough to speak. "Send Mrs. Sinatra a bottle of Dom Perignon and fresh flowers. I'm going down to perform. Mrs. Sinatra will remain here, and no one enters this room." Understood. Respectful. "Yes, sir." Tender. Frank turned back to Ava. She was still crying, her face in her hands. "I'll sing only for you tonight, even if you don't watch." Exhausted, Ava looked up, her makeup ruined, her eyes red. "Just go, Frank." Resigned, Frank closed the door behind him. Dramatic. At 11:07, 37 minutes late, Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage at Hotel Nacional and, enthusiastic, 2,000 people rose to their feet, applauding. Haunted, his lip was swollen, his shirt looked damp, his eyes were red and haunted. Apologetic, he took the microphone. "I apologize for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. Mysterious, love sometimes makes you late. Uneasy,
The crowd laughed, but there was an uneasy quality to it. Something was different about Sinatra tonight. Determined, Frank looked at the orchestra leader. "We're changing the set list. Start with One for My Baby." Emotional. The first notes began. Frank started singing. His voice was rough, raw, more emotional than anyone in that room had ever heard it. His eyes kept drifting upward, toward the 8th floor, hopeful. There was a silhouette on the balcony. Contemplative. Ava was there, smoking a cigarette, a champagne glass in her hand. The gun was on the table inside the room. No longer in her hand. No longer in her thoughts. Tender. Frank sang. Ava listened. Gentle. The hotel maid came in. "Mrs. Sinatra, the flowers have arrived." Romantic. 50 red roses. On the card in Frank's handwriting. "Ready to fight with you forever." Moved, Ava smiled, cried, both at once. Exhausted. The concert ended at 1:30 in the morning. When Frank returned to the lobby, it was chaos. Journalists, fans, photographers, all wanting a piece of him. Pushy. Walter Winchell pushed through the crowd. "Frank, where's Ava? Why were you late?" Diplomatic. Frank smiled, tired but genuine. "My wife is resting upstairs." Any other questions? Peaceful. He got into the elevator, rode up to the 8th floor alone. The door to their suite was ajar. Tender. Inside, Ava was asleep in bed, still wearing her black evening gown. The gun was gone. Gentle. Frank pulled the blanket over her gently. He didn't lie down beside her. Instead, he walked out to the balcony and looked at Havana. The lights, the bay, the city that would always remember this night, even if it never knew the full story. Bittersweet. 2 months later, Ava flew to Spain to film Mogambo. Frank didn't try to stop her. He couldn't anymore. Triumphant. 6 months later, Frank got the role in From Here to Eternity. Virginia Hill really had helped. In March 1954, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. His career was resurrected. The phoenix rose from the ashes. Sad. But at the end of 1953, Ava and Frank divorced. The official reason: irreconcilable differences. Philosophical. The real reason was deeper, more complicated. Two people who loved each other too much to stay together. Because sometimes the most powerful love is the kind that destroys you if you try to hold it. Nostalgic. In 1972, a journalist asked Frank the question he'd been asked 1,000 times. Who was the love of your life? Immediate. Frank's answer was immediate. Ava. Always Ava. Reflective. That night in Havana, at the Hotel Nacional, only 2 people knew what really happened in the royal suite. The gun was never fired, but something did die that night. Or maybe something was truly born for the first time. Wise, because sometimes love begins with learning to let go. Mysterious. Ava's gun was never seen again after that night. Some people say it was left in the hotel room, confiscated quietly by management. Others say Ava threw it into Havana Bay the next morning, watching it disappear into the blue water. Simple, but the truth is simpler. Ava didn't need that gun anymore. Empowered, because she'd realized something. She was living with choice now, not fear. She could leave, she could stay. Either way, it was her decision. Wise. And Frank understood something after that night. Metaphorical. You can't hold water in your fists. You can't cage a bird and expect it to sing. Some people you can't possess. You can only love them. Resigned. And sometimes, just sometimes, that has to be enough. This story has ended, but the feeling it left behind may still linger. If you'd like to discover stories like this together, you can subscribe to the channel.